Hello, this is Erin Lawler presenting my performance-based project created for EDU 513 Models of Teaching at Franciscan University. For this project, I utilized the Gradual Release of Responsibility model. In this model, responsibility of knowledge is transferred from the teacher to the student, progressing from teacher modeling or a focus lesson to guided instruction, then collaboration, and finally, student independence. The topic of this lesson is introducing the idea of religious freedom in America. The essential question for this lesson is what is religious freedom and why is it important in the United States? The learning strategies I will use in this lesson are cues, questions, and advanced organizers, vocabulary terms and phrases, non-linguistic representations, cooperative learning, generating and testing hypotheses, homework and guided practice, and providing feedback. This lesson has two learning objectives. After this lesson, students will be able to explain the religion clauses of the First Amendment, and students will have an understanding of religious freedom in America. After having completed a reading on the Bill of Rights, this lesson begins with the instructor giving the students an advanced organizer. This organizer contains the text of the First Amendment so the students can refer back to it at any point during the lesson. The handout also includes a graphic organizer showing the rights afforded by the First Amendment so that students can visualize each right that is contained in the First Amendment. Since this lesson will focus on the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause, there is space for students to take notes as the lesson progresses. Subsequent lessons on the other rights included with the First Amendment could utilize a similar handout with the graphic organizer rearranged for note-taking. Next, the students would be introduced to the vocabulary phrase religious freedom. The instructor would first explain that the basis for religious freedom in the United States is located in the First Amendment to the Constitution as part of the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment begins with the two religion clauses this lesson pertains to. It states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The first part is called the Establishment Clause, or the freedom from religion. This clause ensures that the government cannot establish an official religion for the United States. It disallows the government to show preference to one religion over another and makes sure that the government cannot show favor or disfavor to believers or non-believers of any religion over another. This freedom was important to the founders due to the religious history of England that led them to the New World in the first place. In some colonies, participation in the state-sponsored church was mandatory, and those who did not attend could be fined. The founders considered it incompatible in a democracy for there to be a government-established religion. The second clause, or the Free Exercise Clause, is the freedom of religion. This clause prohibits the government from passing laws that interfere with religious beliefs. This means that the government cannot regulate what Americans choose to believe in or not to believe in. An example would be that no matter what the religious makeup of a school body is, a public school in America cannot require student prayer. On the opposite side, public schools must also allow for students to pray if it is necessary for them to uphold their beliefs. The instructor would then utilize a popular visualization for the religion clauses of the First Amendment. I would begin by asking the students about ways to keep two things separated. For instance, what keeps us separated from the class next to us? Or how could you keep two people separated in a house? These questions would be leading students to answer a wall. I would use this answer as a bridge to our next piece of information, relating to a figure the students would have previously studied, Thomas Jefferson. I would then introduce Thomas Jefferson's image of the wall of separation between church and state. This image is useful for understanding the separation Jefferson and the other founders felt was necessary between the government and religion in order for our democracy to flourish. The students will already have a reference to Jefferson's importance to the founding of our country and will be able to use this information that they already know in a new context. Jefferson receives much of the credit for the manner in which religion is protected by our government, so he is a key figure to tie into this lesson. This image is also helpful for students to understand what Jefferson meant by state. This separation applies to all branches and levels of government and public schools. Next, the instructor will lead the students in a class discussion. For each question, students' answers will be written on the board for the class to reference. The goal of these questions is to have students engage in a deeper level of understanding. Some possible questions include: why is it important to keep religion and government separate? How does this separation affect religious freedom? And why do you think the founders included the religion clauses in the First Amendment? After the whole class discussion, the instructor will break the students up into small groups. These groups should be selected randomly, containing 3 to 4 students each. Each group will be asked to consider if the First Amendment did not include the religious freedom clauses. The groups will come up with a hypothesis of one scenario or situation that would be different in American life if the First Amendment did not protect religious freedom. A speaker selected by each group will then share that group's hypothesis with the rest of the class. The class will be able to ask questions and make suggestions to get the whole class analyzing and thinking critically about each hypothesis. At the end of the class, the students will be given an assignment to complete as their homework. A worksheet with a generalization principle graphic organizer will be given to each student to complete based on what they learned about religious freedom. The generalization given is religious freedom is an important part of American life. The students will consider what they learned and write down 3 principles that fit this generalization to be shared the next class period. The following class period, students will return with their completed graphic organizers. The instructor will be able to give feedback immediately to the students by asking them to share their answers with the class. Many of the students should have some of the same answers. All of the answers shared will be written on the board. As a class, the students, with the assistance of the instructor, will determine which of the principles listed represent the best examples of why religious freedom is important. Between the organizers and the class discussion, the teacher should be able to determine whether the students have reached the learning objectives. This concludes my performance-based project utilizing the gradual release of responsibility model to introduce students to religious freedom in the United States. This lesson began with the teacher being responsible for the knowledge through the explanation of the First Amendment and religious freedom. Next, a whole class discussion was a method of delivering guided instruction, and small group work allowed for student collaboration. Finally, students took independent ownership of the knowledge by completing their homework. The instructor is able to ensure that all students met the learning objectives by reviewing the work they did on their own with the class.